Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe through velvet hallways, past snoring guards and flickering torches, all the way to the deepest corner of a medieval royal wardrobe. Silk robes rustle like whispers, and the air smells faintly of cedar wood and old power. You reach out, carefully, slowly, and slide open a wooden chest. What's inside isn't gold or jewels or some sacred scroll, it's shoes. Long, absurdly pointy shoes. The kind that curl at the tip like a cinnamon stick and stretch so far they could double as fencing swords. And that's the scandal. These shoes aren't just fashion. They're a full-blown aristocratic crisis. So naturally, a king decides to outlaw them. Yep! Not war. Not taxes. Not sorcery. Shoes. You probably won't survive this one if you have sensitive feet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is walking this timeline with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with silence. Royal silence. The kind that feels intentional. You sneak through corridors flanked by suits of armor, each one like a frozen metal ghost. Behind a half-open door, candles flicker. Inside, noblemen in court advisors gather around a tapestry, but they're not admiring the stitchwork. They're whispering, horrified, about shoes. Not just any shoes, Krakau's. Polaines, to be fancy. They're named after Krakow, because of course fashion spreads like gossip. These shoes could stretch well past the knee, stuffed with moss or wool so they didn't just flop around uselessly. The longer the toe, the higher your status, or so the story went. You spot one noble trying to sit, but his shoe gets caught under the bench and sends him sprawling. No one helps him. Too busy judging how long his toes are. And then, a scandal. A bishop enters, wearing them. Now, you'd think church folk would steer clear of fashion wars, but nope. This bishop is strutting like he's on a Milan runway. A monk gasps. A scribe drops his quill. Someone mutters, blasphemy, like it's a spell. You crouch behind a curtain, trying not to laugh. But it's tense. Because in this era, what you wear could actually get you arrested, or worse, excommunicated. And shoes? Oh, they were practically the devil's work. You imagine living here. Just trying to get from the stable to the pantry without stepping on your own footwear. Streets are muddy, and there's not a sidewalk in sight. But nobles? They're gliding along like penguins at a ball. Their shoes so long they have to tie them to their knees with ribbons, like some sad marionette. Historians still argue whether these extreme designs were truly status symbols or just a bizarre exaggeration of continental fashion. But what's clear is, people notice. Big time. In the darkest corners of the palace, shoemakers start whispering too. You pass one hunched over a candle, muttering Latin curses while stitching yet another foot dagger. He's tired. Not because business is bad, but because demand is insane. Everyone wants longer, fancier, more outlandish. One page boy, barely 16, brags that he's just ordered a pair so long, they'll reach the altar before I do. You picture the poor kid trying to bow without doing a somersault. Of course, not everyone finds it funny. Whispers reach the king. Some say these shoes are responsible for vanity, idleness, and poor posture. Others claim they hide heresy, tiny notes of rebellion slipped into the toe, out of reach, yet dangerously close to power. Even the guards seem confused. Is this what they're supposed to report? A nobleman wearing illegal footwear in the chapel? There's no actual law yet, but you feel it coming. You can smell it, like damp wool and royal disapproval. In a side chamber, the queen eyes her own slippers. Dainty, tasteful, trimmed with fur. But even she's noticed the girls in waiting stretching their toes like they're competing in some absurd fashion joust. You creep away from the wardrobe, past a court jester slumped against a pillar. He's not asleep. He's contemplating his own pointy-toed fate, one jingle bell at a time. Outside, the sky bruises into early morning. But you already know, today, someone's going to mention banning the shoes. They won't do it outright. Not yet. First, there'll be talk of respectability and tradition. Someone will bring up how Charlemagne never wore anything more extravagant than goat-hide boots. But you can feel it stirring. A tension. A foot war brewing beneath the silks and feathers. And you? You're right in the middle of it. Hiding behind royal curtains, eavesdropping on history with a smirk. Because deep down, You know this isn't about shoes. It never is. You wake in a hay-stuffed bed, toes tingling like they know what's coming. Outside, roosters yell their usual nonsense and carts rattle down cobbled streets. But in the palace, the air feels tighter. Like someone's tied the curtains too close, or maybe the tension's just crawling under your skin. You tiptoe back through a side passage, ducking past a tapestry that smells faintly of mildew and burnt meat, and you hear it, snickering. Not joyful court giggles, no, this is scandalous snickering. Mean, the way kids laugh when someone falls face first in the mud. And of course, it's about shoes. Sir Reginald of Dunhollow enters the morning council late. Not because he overslept, but because his shoes are so long they keep folding under him like overcooked noodles. They're red. Bright, aggressive red. With gold-studded tips that clink like tiny bells when he walks. You wince at every step. It's like watching someone try to ballroom dance in ski boots. He bows stiffly to the king, who doesn't even look up. Fashion, someone murmurs, like it's a slur. Here's the thing, Krakau's didn't start long. They started just mildly ridiculous, imported from Eastern Europe where winters were harsh and leather was practical. But leave it to English nobles to see something functional and say, how about we triple the toe length, make it completely useless, and wear it to funerals? That's what happened. The toes grew, first to a few inches, then a foot, then a full 16 inches past the actual foot. Some nobles had them wired to their thighs just to walk properly. Others curled the ends like ram's horns. You imagine trying to run from battle like that, more like trip stylishly into your opponent's sword. Historians still argue whether the trend spread so fast because of war veterans showing off their spoils, or because royalty needed some new way to show, I'm richer than you. What's certain is, it worked. Everyone noticed. The poor were fascinated. The clergy was horrified. And the king? He was starting to get twitchy. You pass two chambermaids whispering near a window. One holds up a shoe like it's cursed. The other squints. How'd you even walk in that? Same way you walk in a corset, carefully and with fear of death. Joke number 1. Tuck it under your belt. Meanwhile, tailors are adapting. They've begun cutting the front of tunics shorter to show off those outrageous toes. The fashion is now officially built around the shoes. If your hem hides them, what's even the point? Men start limping just to keep the tips from dragging. Some wrap them in ribbons. Others attach bells so people hear them coming, like a fashion-forward plague. You wander past the stables, where even the grooms are trying to stitch their own makeshift polanes out of leftover goat hide. One teen boasts that his shoes are so long, he once used them to poke a pig without bending down. His friend isn't impressed. Yeah? Mine scratched the priest's ankle last Sunday. That's divine length, mate. There's always that one-upmanship. Inside the palace, the chapel gets quiet. Too quiet. A sermon begins, and it's not about humility or grace. No, Father Aldrich is preaching directly at everyone's feet. He gestures to a pair of elongated leather beasts parked by the front pew. Pride goeth before a fall, he says, eyes locked on Sir Reginald, who's already tripped 3 times and just knocked over a candle. The fire's small. No panic. But the symbolism? Oh, it lands. And still, the shoes persist. You trail behind a steward carrying breakfast trays, careful not to trip on your own feet, or his. He stops by the Queen's chambers and sighs as he sets the food down. Lady Eleanor's ordered 3 new pairs. Ostrich leather. Dyed violet. I told her it's scandalous. She said it's divinely scandalous. That's joke number 2. It's not just nobles. You start to notice the guards modifying their armor, chiseling out the toe plates to fit the fashion. A squire is reprimanded for using his lance to prop up one of the baron's drooping polanes. Even the jesters are in on it, dancing with shoes so long they form a figure 8 mid-leap. Every hallway you wander, someone's either flaunting their feet or complaining about someone else's. He can't even kneel properly, one court lady sneers, fanning herself dramatically. What kind of knight can't pray without toppling? That's the 3rd joke. We're on schedule. But underneath it all, there's something else, resentment. The kind that festers when people see fashion outpacing practicality. The peasants are trying to copy it now, making crude versions out of wood or patched canvas. And the nobles? Oh, they hate that. What's a symbol of status worth if everyone's wearing it? And that's the heart of it, isn't it? It's not the shoes themselves, it's what they represent. Power, mockery, aspiration. A foot-long toe is basically medieval middle finger couture. The king watches from a balcony as two squires duel in the courtyard. Not with swords, with polanes. One gets tangled in his own, stumbles, and gets beamed with a wooden training sword. His shoe flies off mid-fall and lands squarely in a pig trough. The king turns, quietly. "Enough," he mutters. "You're not supposed to hear that. But you do. And that one word? That's where the trouble starts." By midday, you're trailing the edge of the king's shadow, keeping to the cracks in the flagstones as though the weight of his annoyance might somehow scorch you if you step too close. He isn't shouting. He isn't pacing. No, worse, he's quietly fuming. That particular royal kind of silence that says someone's head is going to roll, metaphorically or otherwise. You angle past the council chamber and eavesdrop through one of those suspiciously well-placed wall holes, probably designed for ventilation, though oddly effective for gossip. Inside, the king listens as Lord Halberd, red-faced and winded, lays out the latest disgrace. An entire row of young knights failed to kneel at mass, because their shoes wouldn't let them. Imagine the absurdity. Half the royal chapel looks like a flock of storks trying to bow. Their curled polanes twitch and wobble like drunken snails. The bishop had to pause the service twice just to get them all repositioned. Lord Halberd snorts. "We are not at court to showcase our cobblers. This isn't a parade of peacocks." The king nods once. Slowly. That's more terrifying than a scream. You watch his knuckles tighten against the arm of his throne, and then, just like that, he calls for parchment. He's writing a proclamation. Shoes are about to become illegal. But before we get to the full ban, you wander backward in time a bit, just to get the lay of the land. Because these shoes didn't appear out of nowhere. They crept in, 1 inch at a time, like ivy on castlestone. And somehow, they stuck, literally and metaphorically. Historians still argue whether polanes originated as war boots, worn exaggeratedly long to intimidate enemies, or if they simply mimicked the pointed architecture of Gothic cathedrals. Either way, their evolution was less about comfort and more about flaunting wealth. Long toes meant you didn't have to walk far or fast. It was like saying, "I don't chase. People come to me." In fact, one particularly flamboyant noble once had his polanes carved with miniature wooden gargoyle faces. Each one stuck its tongue out. Subtle? Not at all. Effective? Absolutely. He got invited to twice as many feasts after that. Meanwhile, shoemakers were having a creative renaissance. They started adding embroidery, dangling charms, even lining the toes with perfume-soaked moss. So yes, people were literally sending their shoes. Because if you can't walk properly, at least let your feet smell like crushed lavender while you collapse. Outside, a merchant hawks a fresh shipment of polanes imported from France. "Hand-stitched in Paris," he shouts, "for the gentleman with lengthier tastes." You spot a boy measuring his foot with a stick, hoping to fudge a few extra inches into his order. The shopkeeper winks. "We can add some flair. Want a tassel? Maybe a tooth from a blessed fish?" That's joke number 1, in case you missed it. Back in the palace, another noble clomps past in shoes so long they have metal caps at the end to keep them from fraying. One clinks against the stone and sparks slightly. The guard flinches. You can't tell if he's worried or just trying not to laugh. Now here's where it gets weird. Polanes were often stuffed, not for shape, but to hold things. Letters. Rings. Bits of dried herbs. One tale even claims a woman had a love token, possibly a lock of hair, in the toe of her suitor's shoe so he could carry her affection everywhere. Sweet, until he stepped in horse muck and ruined the whole gesture. Some scholars think the pointy toes were phallic symbols, literal foot-long flexes in leather form. Others argue that's modern overthinking. But whatever their origin, one thing's sure, people wore them with pride. And eventually, obsession. The king, however, is out of patience. He's watched his nobles trip, kneel sideways, get stuck in doorways, and even fall downstairs, all because they refuse to give up this impractical fashion. And now that the lower classes have started to imitate them, that's the final straw. Status should be exclusive, not accessible. That's where the danger lies. You peer into the royal study and see it for yourself, the proclamation. It's still fresh ink, curling at the edges. It reads something like, "Henceforth, no person under the rank of lord shall wear shoes with points exceeding 2 inches in length. Violation of this law shall be met with fines, confiscation, and, where appropriate, public shaming." You smirk. Public shaming for bad shoes? Sounds suspiciously modern. But wait, there's more. Lords may wear points up to 6 inches. Dukes get 10. Only royalty may go longer, and even then, only on feast days. The king is taking length back under the crown, as if to say, you want outrageous? Leave it to the throne. Joke number 2, even the monarchy isn't above a bit of petty flexing. As word spreads, nobles start panicking. Some rush to have their shoes trimmed down. Others hide them in trunks or give them to their servants, who immediately try to sell them behind the stables. One poor courtier burns his in a fire pit, sobbing as if saying goodbye to a beloved pet. You spot ladies made attempting to ham a toe tip into a spiral so it meets the new size requirement. It doesn't work. She ends up with something that looks like a leather pig's tail. That's joke number 3, in full curly glory. The ban hasn't even been officially enforced, but already the court is in chaos. The king smiles. Not a happy smile, more like a man who's just regained control over an unruly dinner party. And you? You're still watching from the shadows, shoes safely hidden under your cloak, wondering if this foot-focused rebellion is about to turn into something much bigger than fashion. Because people don't like being told what not to wear. Especially when the toes of their shoes feel like extensions of their identity. You wake to whispers. Not the scandalous kind this time, no giggling about garish footwear, but heavy, nervous murmurs. The kind that pool in palace corners and cling to stone walls like mildew. The decree has hit, and it's already rattling cages. Or, more precisely, closets. You sneak down to the royal chapel again, now oddly quiet. Everyone's staring at each other's feet. Like some twisted new etiquette rule has kicked in, eye contact is out, shoe judgment is in. You can almost hear the internal calculations. Are those legal? 6 inches? 10? Are we measuring from the toe or from the ankle? One knight subtly lifts his cloak to hide a suspicious curl. Then, in strides the bishop. Yes, that bishop, the one from before. Except now his shoes are blunt, plain, almost apologetic. It's a sight so jarring you blink twice. He walks as though in mourning. Someone whispers, he looks like a farmhand. And for once, no one giggles. You exit before it gets too tense and follow a line of young squires down toward the barracks. Most are quiet, sulking. A few mutter about the anti-foot agenda. One, bolder than the rest, waves his modified shoes in the air and yells, "At least now I won't die walking to the loo." Half the group laughs, but it's that forced laugh, the kind people do when they're not sure if they're about to be arrested. That's your first joke. Mark it. The real buzz, though, comes from outside the palace, particularly from the clergy. Because here's the twist, they kind of love this new ban. See, for decades, the church had been at war with what they called devilish vanities. Shoes, especially polaines, were the top of their list. Not war, not famine, not corruption, no, the biggest sin was flamboyant footwear. Priests preached against them from pulpits. Monks scrawled angry shoe illustrations in the margins of manuscripts. One even drew a demon wearing curled polaines while stealing a soul. Historians still argue whether the church's hatred of the shoe was moral or political, whether it was really about vanity, or just a way to jab at nobility without risking excommunication. Whatever the reason, they saw the king's ban as a godsend. Literally. You sit in the back pew of a modest town chapel and listen to Father Aldrich again. This time, he's booming with glee. The king has turned from sin, he proclaims. The Lord has no need of curved toes, only curved hearts. A solid line, honestly, might steal it. But not everyone in the church is on board. One ambitious friar argues that the ban doesn't go far enough. We must burn them, he declares, dramatically holding up a shoe like it's a cursed relic. Purge the wicked arch. Another priest gently reminds him that's not how you exorcise footwear. They compromise on a shoe bonfire outside the monastery walls. That's joke number 2, laced with holy fervor. You follow the scent of burning leather to the edge of town where a group of monks are indeed tossing pointy shoes into flames. Each toss is punctuated by a prayer. One monk quietly slips a pair into his own satchel before walking off. For research, he mumbles. The hypocrisy doesn't go unnoticed. Back at court, things are shifting too. Nobles are reinventing their wardrobes. Gone are the ornate curled monstrosities. Now it's all about subtle length. Understated toes. Elegant lines. Shoes that whisper, not scream. Fashion doesn't die, it just mutates. But not everyone adapts so smoothly. You sneak into a storeroom and find a minor lord, Lord Fernley, having what can only be described as a shoe-based meltdown. How will they know? He wails, clutching a pair of 12-inch polanes like lost children. How will the world know who I am? His valet gently suggests that titles, land, and the 4-story portrait gallery might still do the trick. Lord Fernley glares like he's just been asked to wear burlap. That's joke 3. Soft, pitiful, perfect. You wander deeper into the court's undercurrent of resentment. Because while the church celebrates and the king basks in his own decisiveness, many nobles feel betrayed. Not just because of fashion, but because of control. If the king can tell them what not to wear, what's next? Will he ban jeweled daggers? Feathered hats? Embroidered codpieces? Unthinkable. Meanwhile, the common folk are confused. They weren't exactly included in the original decree. But suddenly sheriffs are knocking on peasant doors, demanding foot inspections. A cobbler in town is fined for suspicious stitching. One poor lad gets a public lashing just for stepping into church with boots that curve too enthusiastically. The lines blur. What's illegal, exactly? The length? The style? Or just the vibe? Historians still debate whether this part of the law was ever meant to apply to commoners or if local enforcers just took matters into their own hands. Some towns even added their own amendments. No boots above the shin. No pointed toes during Lent. No red-dyed leather on feast days. The laws get ridiculous fast. And enforcement? Hilarious. You watch as 2 town constables chase a teenager down a muddy alley. His polanes slap the ground like wet slinkies. He hurdles a pig cart, loses a shoe midair, and keeps running. The guards stop. One of them sighs, picks up the abandoned shoe, and mutters, confiscated. Evidence. Again. You can't help it, you laugh. But behind the comedy, there's a growing worry. Because it's not just about style anymore. It's about order. The king's word must be law. If people ignore this, what else might they ignore? You feel it in the way guards stiffen when questioned, the way nobles suddenly speak in measured tones, the way even the jesters stop joking about feet. Something beneath the surface has shifted. You walk past the wardrobe again. This time, it's locked. You slip into the gallery just as the afternoon light pours through stained glass, splashing reds and purples across a row of statues, all looking deeply unimpressed with the state of contemporary footwear. And frankly, same. Because today, it's not just the peasants or priests talking about the shoe ban. No, now it's the aristocracy, and they're furious in the most luxurious way imaginable. You trail behind Lady Winifred as she storms down the corridor, skirts swishing like an angry tide. She pauses to glare at a tapestry, as if the embroidered knight on horseback personally banned her favorite polanes. First the king taxes our wine, she snaps, now he takes our toes. What's next? Tunic restrictions? Her ladies-in-waiting nod solemnly, though one is clearly hiding a laugh. You spot a bit of the legal leather peeking from beneath her hem, nothing scandalous, just a tasteful little point. But in this political climate? That's basically treason in shoe form. See, the rich didn't just wear long shoes for fun. These monstrosities were status icons. You could tell someone's rank by how much room they needed just to walk down a hall without bumping a wall with their toes. Longer meant richer. Longer meant lazier. Longer meant, I don't shovel anything but gossip, darling. Historians still argue whether fashion during this period was driven by personal vanity or a deeper social contract, one that forced nobles to constantly one-up each other just to stay relevant. Either way, shoes were the battleground. And now, the king had stripped them of their favorite weapon. At a feast that night, you see the fallout firsthand. Lords and ladies shuffle in awkward silence, heads up but eyes low, because nobody wants to be the first to show up in post-ban shoes. You watch one baroness try to angle her foot under the table discreetly, only to discover her neighbor doing the exact same thing. Their eyes meet. Silent panic. Across the hall, Sir Egbert, forever trying too hard, shows up in wooden sandals. He claims they're a statement against indulgence. They look like furniture. Someone whispers, is he part of the decor now? Joke number 1, served over roast duck. Meanwhile, others rebel quietly. Embroiderers start sneaking hidden symbols into slipper seams, tiny lions, crescents, initials. Secret language for I still have taste, even if my toes don't curve. It becomes a court-wide game. Who can say the most with the least amount of leather? You duck into the tailor's workshop and find absolute chaos. There's a pile of discarded shoes taller than you, each one sadder than the last. The head tailor is weeping softly over a pair of boots embroidered with silver moons. It was my masterpiece, he sighs, patting them like a sick child. They had tassels, yes, but tasteful ones. That's joke number 2, and yes, it involves tasteful tassels. Some nobles don't just mourn, they retaliate. One young duke sends the king a box of sausages shaped like polanes. The note reads, "If I must give up toe length, I may as well eat it." The court pretends not to laugh. The king does not. But while nobles mope and tailor shops descend into mourning, another issue starts bubbling beneath the surface: imitation. The rich hate being copied. Always have. And peasants, bless them, had just started catching on before the ban hit. They were trying to make their own krakows out of wood scraps, bark, and whatever passable leather they could scavenge. One farmer's wife even carved a pair from hardened cowhide, then painted the toes gold. Gold? Her neighbor scoffed. What are you, the Duchess of Muck? Joke number 3, hand-delivered from the village compost heap. But now, with the ban in place, that whole mimicry game? Done. The nobles don't see it as justice. They see it as a betrayal of the natural order. If the poor can't pretend to be us, who are we? It's an identity crisis wearing wool socks. That's why the reaction's so fierce. It's not just about fashion. It's about losing a visible marker of superiority. You pass the throne room just as a delegation of barons enters, clearly ready for a showdown. They bow, but not deeply. The king watches them the way a cat watches a bird it's already caught. He doesn't flinch. Your Majesty, one begins. Might we suggest a reconsideration of the restrictions? The king just raises an eyebrow. Your footwear seems entirely mobile. I see no suffering. Someone behind you mutters, yet, and you barely stifle a laugh. Still, the nobles aren't done. They begin listing grievances. The law undermines traditional garments. It restricts cultural expression. It affects trade with foreign shoemakers. The king listens. Then, ever so casually, he drops this gem: fashion should never outrun dignity. That's not a joke. That's a royal mic drop. You sense the meeting is over before it ends. The nobles file out, stiff-lipped and boiling inside. One kicks the corner of a tapestry on the way out, probably thinking it's poetic. It isn't. Later that night, you spot a group of them plotting by candlelight. We should form a style council, one whispers. A hidden society of tasteful rebellion. They all nod solemnly, even though the phrase style council makes you want to laugh into your sleeve. You lie back on a stolen cushion and stare at the ceiling, shoes tucked under your cloak, mind buzzing. The king thinks he's squashed a trend. But you? You've seen enough Velvet Rebellion to know this isn't the end. This is the start of something far more fashionable, and far more dangerous. Morning arrives with a side of resentment. You wake to the sound of a cobbler pounding leather, each hammer strike like a middle finger to royal decree. In the market below, murmurs ripple through the crowd like wind through barley, low, continuous, and charged. Today isn't just another day. Today, the peasants are protesting, with their feet. You slink between baskets of radishes and wheels of questionable cheese, pretending to admire a cart of spoons while actually listening to a baker argue with a blacksmith about his shoes. They're laughably long, pointed, patchy, and stuffed with straw. It's satire, the baker says proudly. My toes are parody. The blacksmith snorts. Parody is still illegal, if it's over 6 inches. Joke number 1. Petty, perfect, peasant-powered. Because here's the thing, the common folk aren't following the law, and it's starting to show. After decades of watching nobles parade around with foot daggers for shoes, the lower classes had finally started mimicking them, not for luxury, but for hope. To wear what the elite wore was to inch a little closer to that gilded ceiling. A long toe might not buy you land, but it could earn a second glance at market. Maybe a little respect. Maybe even a job inside the manor. Now, that dream is outlawed. Historians still argue whether the fashion itself ever really meant power to peasants, or if it was just a bizarre trickle-down trend. But in the muddy corners of the kingdom, where people couldn't afford silk or jewels, a pointed shoe became a symbol: I am not invisible. And that's why the ban hits so hard. You duck into a small cobbler shop. It's dim, reeking of oil and damp leather. A boy is stitching fast, tongue between his teeth, while his father watches the door. You ask what they're making, and the boy shrugs. Standard length, he says, but winks. He's lying. The toe curls slightly under the workbench. The father leans in. We mark the legal ones with red thread, the others with blue. Coded stitching. Resistance by shoelace. If that's not fashion revolution, what is? Outside, a group of millers gather around a merchant cart, not to buy, but to talk. Quietly. Strategically. They've heard of a traveling priest in the next town over who's still wearing polaines beneath his robes. If clergy can do it, one mutters, why not us? Because of course, the enforcement's been selective. Nobles with influence still get to bend the rules. One baroness claims her shoes are medical, for spinal realignment, she insists, though you're pretty sure she just wants her boots to poke the back of her enemies in chapel. Another knight defends his extravagant slippers as ancestral footwear passed down through 8 generations of squires. Nobody believes him, but the guards let him pass. So when the baker makes his extra-long parody pair and wears them to church, it's not just fashion, it's protest. And that protest spreads. In taverns, people start exaggerating their shoes again. Just slightly. Artistic expression, they say with smirks. A farm girl cuts hers in the shape of a goose beak. A cart boy glues fake gold coins to the toes. The absurdity masks the anger, but it's there. Bubbling. One town even hosts a secret foot race for illegal polaines. You arrive just in time to see a butcher sprint stumble across the finish line, trailing confetti and bits of cooked sausage from his ceremonial belt. The crowd roars, not because he won, but because he didn't fall. Joke number 2. Bonus points for the sausage belt. But the joy has limits. Because eventually, someone gets caught. In a village not far from the castle, a young weaver is dragged into the town square and forced to remove her shoes in front of everyone. They're modest, really, only 8 inches, but 8 is too many for a peasant girl. The sheriff lectures her loudly, then slashes the toes off with a dagger. You flinch at the ripping sound. The girl just stares, barefoot now, eyes narrow. Not humiliated, furious. You pass a scribe on the road later, grumbling as he logs another shoe offense. He sighs. We've had more foot crimes than cattle theft this week. The parchment's running out. Joke number 3, soaked in bureaucratic despair. Meanwhile, the king remains above it all. He isn't strolling the streets or facing the weavers and farmers. No, he's reading reports. Neatly written lists detailing illegal toe lengths, contraband cobblers, even rumors of a traveling puppeteer with pointed boots that twist into spirals for dramatic effect. And the king? He underlines that one in red. You find him walking his private gardens in silence, the roses heavy with rain, his own shoes modestly rounded. A page follows 3 paces behind, carrying a list of new offenses and a fresh pair of slippers. The king pauses near a hedge and mutters, "They mock me with leather." Because deep down, he knows this isn't about fashion anymore. It's about defiance. What started as a royal gesture of restraint has morphed into a challenge. Every shoe that's a little too long, a little too bright, a little too cheeky, that's a message. You can outlaw a trend. You can fine a cobbler. But you can't stop people from laughing with their feet. Especially not when those laughs have a point. Literally. It's just after sunrise when the trumpets sound, a sharp, slightly over-enthusiastic blast that tells you something official and unpleasant is about to happen. You roll out of your bed of pilfered furs and slink toward the great hall, where the king is about to do something very uncharming. He's standing tall, regal, and oddly smug beneath a tapestry of St. George slang, something vaguely dragon-shaped. His boots? Simple. Modest. Almost aggressively round-toed, as if to say, look at me, exemplary, restrained, morally superior. The courtiers gather in silence, and for once, nobody's rustling. No showy footwork, just hushed breathing and the uncomfortable squeak of leather being nervously flexed. Everyone's hoping today won't be the day their shoes get publicly named and shamed. Then he says it. In the name of dignity, order, and the crown, the king begins, I declare that any person wearing polaines exceeding legal length shall be fined, shod in chains, and displayed on the stocks for the lesson of all. There's a beat of silence. Then murmurs, slow, incredulous, foot-based panic. A few glances dart downward, instinctive. One noble discreetly lifts his hem, as if hoping his shoes will magically shorten out of fear. But the king's not done. And furthermore, he adds, all such footwear shall be confiscated and burned in a formal ceremony of cleansing. We shall rid the kingdom of this excess, toe by toe. That last part? A direct quote. Even you blink at the theatrical flair. Historians still argue whether Edward IV truly authored this crackdown alone or whether a few humorless advisors goaded him into it. Some even speculate that a personal insult, perhaps a noble outtoed him at court, triggered the entire escalation. Whatever the cause, you're watching a monarch draw a line in the mud. With both heels. As he steps away, the crowd breaks like a dropped plate. You hear anxious whispers bounce off the stone. Shod in chains? Displayed in stocks? What if I'm just visiting from France? Because yes, even foreign guests are now expected to obey the law, or risk the humiliating fate of the iron-shod slipper. You find yourself at the back of the great hall beside Sir Troman, a minor knight with a major tendency to panic. He tugs at your sleeve. Do you think the king will come measure them himself? I swear mine are regulation, I boiled them shorter. Joke number 1, seasoned with desperation and boiled leather. Elsewhere, nobles are already hatching workarounds. Lady Thistleby has invented something she calls toe caps, removable extensions that snap on and off depending on the audience. Technically not illegal. Ethically? Questionable. Stylish? Dubious. But desperate times. You trail a pair of royal guards into the palace cellar, where confiscated polaines are now being stored like contraband relics. Row upon row of them, each tagged with the name of its disgraced owner. Some are grotesque, 2-footers lined with rabbit fur, others studded with pearls, one pair tipped with bells that ring softly whenever someone sneezes. And at the very back? A locked cabinet. You peek through the grill and catch a glint of gold. Legend says it's the king's own polaines from his youth. 12 inches of guilt and hypocrisy. He'll never wear them again, but he hasn't destroyed them either. Interesting. You pass a parchment posted on the outer gate's Royal Footwear Statute, Addendum 3. The list of regulations is now 2 pages long. No points past 6 inches. No curl tips. No bells. No excessive dye. No visible embroidery in the shape of birds, beasts, or saints. Seriously, someone must have gone too far. A jester behind you reads it aloud in a falsetto and snickers. So if I want to honor St. Francis with pigeon-themed heels, I'm a criminal? That's joke number 2, Pigeon Saint edition. But make no mistake, enforcement is real. That afternoon, you tag along with the Foot Watch, a newly formed patrol whose entire job is inspecting shoes. Their leader, a man named Baldwin, takes it far too seriously. We defend the dignity of the realm, one toe at a time, he says, before dramatically confiscating a 12-year-old's embroidered slippers. Later, they arrest a merchant for selling hidden toe extenders, hollow wooden inserts that slide into legal shoes and pop out at feasts. The merchant claims they're for support and posture. Baldwin mutters, "You'll need support when you're sitting in the stocks." Even cobblers are being questioned. Some flee to the countryside, taking their longest lasts and most daring sketches with them. You meet one, crouched in a barn, surrounded by designs so outrageous they belong in a fantasy opera. "They'll come back into style," he whispers. "Just you wait." Joke number 3, with a wink and a footnote from the fashion underground. But not everyone's joking. At the far end of the market, you stumble upon a group of nobles huddled behind a cart, whispering furiously. They're forming a petition. Not to overturn the law entirely, that'd be treason, but to request a seasonal exemption. 4 feasts. 4 festivals. 4 weddings. Let us be pointy on special occasions, they argue. You suspect it won't work, but the idea spreads. In the meantime, people get creative. You see someone carve the shape of polaines into their shadow using chalk, as if to say, "My feet may obey, but my spirit curves on." Others walk with exaggerated steps, dragging their heels to simulate weight and elegance. A silent protest, done entirely in stride. And that's when it hits you. This is no longer a shoe issue. It's performance. It's identity. It's a battle over who gets to define taste, and whether taste can be tamed by law. As you duck back into the palace kitchens to warm your frostbitten fingers, you pass a servant muttering, "Wish he'd outlaw boiled cabbage instead." You agree. At least cabbage never got anyone arrested. By now, the air around the palace feels like it's made of tightly stretched thread. Any moment, someone's going to tug too hard and unravel the whole embroidery. And all because of a few extra inches of leather on someone's feet. You linger at the edge of a morning council meeting, not quite eavesdropping, not quite spying, just doing your usual background blending. A scribe reads aloud the latest version of the royal footwear statute, and this time, it's gotten weirdly specific. No polanes shall exceed 2 inches beyond the natural toe for commoners, 6 for lords, 10 for dukes. Decorative embroidery is permitted only on non-religious holidays, and all curled or upward-pointed shoes must be reported upon entrance to any royal hall. One noble squints. Do we measure from the leather or from the sock? From the tip of the longest toe, your grace. A baron coughs politely. Define toe dot. The room erupts into a heated, extremely serious debate about anatomy and angles. Historians still argue whether this sudden hyper-technical legal frenzy was meant to clarify the rules or confuse people just enough that they'd give up trying. Either way, the loopholes start appearing faster than the king can issue new clauses. You spend the afternoon chasing down some of the more ridiculous ones. A wealthy merchant has hired a dwarf to walk beside him wearing his polanes. Technically the shoes aren't on his feet, so can't be illegal, right? One noble glues his long-toed shoes to stilts, claiming they're transport equipment, not fashion. Joke number 1, from the Stilt Club of Legal Denial. In the countryside, cobblers get even cleverer. You visit a village where shoes are now made with retractable toes. Yes, like tiny leather scrolls. You pull a string, and the tip coils in. Enter the town square. Coiled. Back home? Unfurl and strut. You watch a demonstration and clap like a trained monkey. Meanwhile, noble households have started running what you can only call foot salons. Behind locked doors, tailors and servants gather to measure, trim, modify, and sometimes enhance shoes to fit the law just enough. One lady of the court calls it toescaping. 10 inches is enough, she says, smoothing the tip of her boot. You just need to know how to use it. Joke number 2, skinlessly whispered behind a veil. But the best workaround comes from a minor baronet who starts wearing false feet. He straps them to the outside of his boots, short, round, and well within the law, while the actual polanes lurk beneath. At a glance, he's perfectly legal. But walk behind him and you'll notice the real toe tips trailing out like snakes. When the guards question him, he replies, "Sir, these are my ceremonial feet. I would never disrespect the crown with actual toes of that length." He's fine anyway. But the legend lives on. You can't help but admire the creativity. Even the guards look torn, half amused, half exhausted. A pair of them whisper near the stables, comparing notes on the latest toe disguise trend. One chuckles, "I saw a bishop with detachable velvet tips. Said they were spiritual antennae." Joke number 3, blessed and ridiculous. But the king? Not laughing. You catch sight of him in his study, frowning over a scroll so long it unrolls into the hallway. It's a list of known evaders. Beside each name, shoe length, style, embellishment, and suspected attitude. There's even a foot-drawn sketch of someone's band pair. The king circles it twice. He pens another addendum. This time, it's about shoemakers. They are now required to register their designs with the royal office. Every shoe must be logged, examined, and approved before being sold. The punishment for failure? Closure. Or worse, public branding as footmongers of treason. That phrase becomes its own thing. You hear it shouted in jest across market stalls. Oi! Get your carrots or be labeled a footmonger of treason. It even ends up on a tavern sign. They serve ale in boot-shaped mugs. Still, despite the laughter, the tension is rising. You attend a court feast where nobody eats much. They're too busy watching each other's feet. A single visible curl and the whole table goes quiet. One poor lady's dog knocks off her cloak to reveal a sequin 10-incher. The gasp nearly knocks the wine from her hands. She claims it's a gift from a foreign ambassador. Cultural diplomacy, she says. It would be rude not to wear them. The king doesn't buy it. Her shoes are seized on the spot. What follows is a short, uncomfortable ceremony in the palace courtyard. A wooden platform is built. The shoes are displayed, their long, curling tips pointing skyward like accused fingers. A herald reads out their crimes. Too long, too lavish, too red. Then a torchbearer steps forward. They burn them. Leather pops and curls. Smoke rises. And from behind you, someone mutters, "That was my pair." You turn. A young noble stares at the fire, jaw tight. "First my shoes," he says. "What next? My cloak? My hat? My horse's feather?" You want a joke, but he's not laughing. No one is. This isn't about fashion anymore. It's about what happens when a king decides your feet are a threat to the throne. You're ankle-deep in leather scraps and murmured curses, crouched in the back of a cobbler's workshop that smells like sweat, beeswax, and very illegal ambition. The shoemakers are not taking this quietly. Every corner of the room is filled with someone threading a needle or hammering saws or whispering about loopholes. And not the legal kind. The rebellion has begun, not with swords, but with stitchwork. Meet Giles, mid-30s, eyes like oversteeped tea, and hands permanently dyed brown from years of dyeing leather. He's hunched over a workbench, shaping a toe that curls so tightly you're amazed it hasn't looped into a perfect spiral. He glances up when you arrive, then back to his work. "They want shoes," he mutters. "We make shoes. What do they expect us to do, start weaving tunics?" You ask if he's worried about being caught. He snorts. "Caught? Half the foot watch wears my work. Off duty, of course." Joke number 1. Delivered with a wink and a mallet. You step over a stack of hides and nearly trip on something that looks like a boot mated with a musical instrument. Giles sees you look. "Commission," he says flatly. "Some fool wants bells sewn into the toes so they jingle when he bows. Says it's for dramatic effect." You ask who it's for. He shrugs. "Someone important enough not to care." And that's the problem, isn't it? The law is sharp on the poor, dull on the powerful. Rich patrons still order their fancy footgear, just quietly now, in backrooms like this. Shoemakers pretend they're making archery cases or decorative wine sleeves and deliver boots wrapped in linen, labeled onion sacks. It's a theater of denial, and everyone's playing a part. Historians still debate whether the shoemaker resistance was organized or simply a shared survival instinct among artisans. But one thing is certain, the cobblers became couriers of rebellion. If the toe was the message, they were the messengers. You sit beside a young apprentice named Wren, barely 15, who's quietly adding hidden compartments to a pair of legal-length boots. "It's for letters," she explains. "Or coins. Or teeth, if you're into that." You hope she's joking. You're not sure. Joke number 2, maybe. Or a red flag. In another part of the city, a former royal shoemaker named Master Hollis has started building a shoe archive. Not a museum, too public, but a hidden vault of band designs, each tagged with a name, date, and the story of its confiscation. You sneak a visit and nearly weep at the artistry. Jewel-toned slippers with embroidered dragons, winter boots with curled antlers at the toes, even a pair lined with tiny mirrors so the wearer could check their reflection in puddles. One shoe, just one, sits on a velvet pedestal. 12 inches long, encrusted with sapphire beads, its tip curved into a crescent moon. Beneath it, a card reads, "Confiscated from Lord Ambert. Banned on sight. Caused 3 nobles to trip and 1 to propose." That's joke number 3, buried in a love story and a lawsuit. But rebellion isn't just in the stitching. It's in the chatter, the network. Giles sends Wren out with deliveries, boots wrapped in oilcloth, never labeled. She never speaks at the door. Just knocks twice, drops the bundle, and vanishes. Some are for merchants. Others, for members of the court who've developed a sudden interest in exotic foot therapy. No one says the word Pelaine anymore. But everyone knows. The guards are catching on. You follow one patrol as they storm a workshop on the edge of town. They find nothing, just sandals, plain slippers, work boots. The cobbler shrugs. "Business is modest these days," he says. But behind him, you notice a curtain twitch. A hidden back room. And when the guards leave, 2 men emerge with boots so long they could double as sled runners. The cobblers are hiding their best work. They're building secret compartments beneath their floorboards, sketching designs in coded shorthand. One uses fruit names to denote length, apple for legal, melon for risky, banana for bold. You think back to the king's decree and wonder, did he imagine this would happen? That he'd turn an entire artisan class into nighttime dissidents? Because that's what it's become. Shoemaking, once a respected trade, is now borderline subversion. You slip into a tavern known to host cordwainer circles, underground meetings of rebel cobblers. The doors marked with a tiny boot carved into the wood. Inside, men and women huddle over tankards, discussing the latest confiscations, the latest escapes, the latest design innovations. "Have you seen the new collapsible tip?" someone whispers. "Fits in the palm of your hand. Add it to any boot in under a minute." They caught a boy selling toe snaps disguised as belt buckles. "My cousin's making clogs now," just to avoid suspicion. Clogs, someone spits. That's surrender. The laughter's loud. Not merry, sharp, defiant. You sip your watered ale and feel it, the pulse of resistance. This isn't just about shoes anymore. It's about pride, autonomy, craftsmanship. The right to make something beautiful, even if it curls a little too much at the end. As you slip out the back door, one of the cobblers presses something into your hand. A small leather token shaped like a pointed shoe. If you're ever in trouble, she says, show this to any shoemaker. We take care of our own. And suddenly you realize, the king didn't just ban a fashion trend. He forged a fellowship. You're back in the city's underbelly now, not metaphorically, but literally. The kind of place where chamber pots empty into the street and deals are made behind steaming cauldrons of questionable stew. Only today, it's not stew being traded under the table. It's shoes. Specifically, band shoes. You duck into a tavern called the Crooked Toe, a name that's a bit on the nose these days. It smells like smoke, garlic, and secrets. Inside, the clink of mugs and the thump of dice echo beneath low beams strung with drying herbs and smuggled bootlaces. At a corner table, two men swap something wrapped in cloth and tied with twine. You know the shape before it even peeks through, curled, narrow, criminally pointy. Welcome to the underground slipper scene. It started, like all black markets do, with a whisper. A noble cousin complaining about his retired polanes. A cobbler's apprentice offering to keep them safe. Next thing you know, there's a whole network, noble clients, artisan suppliers, cloakroom intermediaries. If you want outlawed shoes in this town, all it takes is knowing the right knock and having the right coin. Or the right gossip. You sit at the bar, listening. There's a pair in the cathedral's crypt, someone murmurs. They're using hollow book bindings now, leather covers with shoe tips inside. My cousin's tailor wears pointy boots disguised as chamber pot covers. Joke number 1, and yes, that's equal parts disgusting and brilliant. What's striking is how deeply this trend-turned crime has embedded itself in everyday life. People talk about outlawed footwear the way smugglers talk about foreign spices, hushed, reverent, and vaguely hungry. There's a new kind of currency now, not just gold, but taste, style, audacity. One woman, dressed in what can only be described as peasant chic with a vengeance, sips mulled cider and flaunts her left foot just enough to reveal a slender velvet toe curve. Everyone pretends not to notice. But everyone notices. Historians still argue whether the black market for banned fashion like this ever truly rivaled the real economy, but records suggest entire trade routes emerged just for delicate goods. Ships docked with boot blanks from Flanders. Couriers arrived with grain sacks that rustled like oiled leather. One duke even funded an entire side business, codenamed Softpoint, operating under his textile accounts. You head down the tavern's back staircase, guided by a hunched man who says nothing, just jerks his thumb toward a hidden cellar door. It creaks open, revealing a candlelit room strung with linen tarps and shelves stacked high with outlawed footwear. Boots, slippers, sandals with dangerous flair. One pair glints with silver and sapphires. Another is so long it's stored coiled like a snake. You run your fingers along the shelf, careful not to disturb the order. Each shoe has a tag, initials, size, pickup date. This isn't chaos, it's inventory. And it's guarded. A woman in a wine red steps out from the shadows. Looking for something sharp, she asks. You hesitate. Not sharp, you say. Just misunderstood. She smiles. Aren't we all? You learn her name's Elswith. She runs this cellar, manages orders, arranges discreet deliveries. You ask if it's dangerous. Of course it is, she replies, but anything worth wearing usually is. Joke number 2, with a dagger under its tongue. She shows you her favorite piece, a slipper made from eel skin, dyed storm blue, with a glass bead stitched to the toe. It belonged to a woman who refused to bow to the bishop unless he complimented her footwear. Did he? He called it heresy. She called it Wednesday. You ask how she avoids getting caught. She shrugs. We're cobblers and couriers. Nobody suspects us. They think the people making shoes aren't clever enough to plan a rebellion. They're wrong, of course. Elswith explains how messages are sent. A feather sewn into the lining means safe drop. A slanted stitch on the heel? Watch for guards. She even designed a slipper with a hollow tip used to pass a love letter between two nobles banned from seeing each other. The guards never notice. They were too busy measuring the hemline. Outside, the network stretches. There's a bootmaker in the eastern quarter who dyes contraband shoes to match peasant tones, so they look drab, but shimmer under moonlight. A courier who delivers poultry by day and Pauline-shaped contraband by night. Even the street children help. They run interference, carry messages, and sometimes steal confiscated boots from guardhouses. One girl sells them back for twice the original price. You watch her count coins beside a fire pit and grin. They call me Goosefoot, she says. On account of my waddle. Helps with balance when I wear two different sizes. Joke number 3, straight from the Alleyway Academy. But all jokes aside, the operation's running deep. They're documenting everything now, who wore what, who lost what, whose boots were burned. One day, Ellsworth says, they'll publish it. The Chronicles of the Outlawed Foot. You imagine it, a great tome bound in leather, filled with sketches and rebellion stitched into every line. Maybe one day, when the king's long gone and fashion is free again, someone will read it by candlelight and laugh at the idea that curved shoes ever scared a throne. You thank Ellsworth and slip back upstairs, shoes tucked safely under your cloak. Above ground, life moves on. The city sleeps, the guards circle, and people still walk, carefully, strategically, rebelliously. Because every footstep now is a choice, to obey, or to point just a little too far and hope no one notices. Or better yet, that they do. You shuffle along the cobbled edge of the city square, staying close to the shadows as a crowd starts to gather, slow, reluctant, and cold. It's the kind of morning that feels like the world forgot to warm up. Frost clings to boots and breath fogs in the air like tiny clouds of hesitation. The people aren't here for a sermon, or a feast, or a market. No, today it's a trial. And the defendant? A pair of shoes. You squeeze in just close enough to see the makeshift platform. On it stands a pale, thin man in noble garb, his wrists loosely bound in symbolic shame. His Paulines, however, are the real stars of the show. They're tied to a pole and displayed like captured criminals, tips exaggerated into spirals that look almost smug. Embroidered in gold, with little metal sunbursts stitched onto the toes. You can feel the crowd judging harder than the magistrate. The magistrate, a lean man with a scroll longer than his patience, reads aloud the charges. Item the first, exceeding 10 inches of toe length without license. Item the second, wearing gold thread embellishment on a Monday, a market day, within view of clergy. Item the third, refusing to remove said Paulines when ordered, and instead using them to knock over a ceremonial urn. Joke number 1, presented with legal gravity and ash-covered urns. The accused defends himself, not by apology, but with flair. These shoes are a tribute, he insists, to artistry, tradition, to my great-uncle, who once marched in Paulines from Dover to York without a blister. The crowd murmurs. Impressed? Maybe. Amused? Definitely. But the magistrate isn't laughing. He gestures, and the guards approach with a stick. Not for punishment, oh no. It's a measuring stick. Ornate. Silver-tipped. Marked with inches, and the royal seal etched on the side. The footstaff of justice. 2 guards lean in, solemn as monks, and begin the sacred act of shoe measurement. 12 inches. Gasp. The accused grins. It's heritage. The magistrate scowls. It's heresy. Historians still argue whether these public trials were genuinely meant to deter offenders or were simply theater, foot-fueled morality plays to make an example of someone every fortnight. Regardless, the crowd eats it up like a tavern roast. The verdict? Fined. Shamed. And, for dramatic flourish, his shoes are mounted on a pike in the square, heels together like kissing criminals, labeled, illicit length, confiscated in the name of modesty. A boy tosses a turnip at them. Misses. Hits a guard instead. The guard gives him a look. The boy disappears like a squirrel into the nearest alley. You follow him, half out of curiosity, half to get away from the smell of burnt justice. Turns out, he's not just a turnip flinger. He's part of a growing circle of runners who make a game of it now, find the trials, sneak in, mock the process. They call themselves the toe watchers. We keep score, he says proudly. Longest boot, fastest trial, best courtroom lie, and worst pike placement, another boy adds, chuckling. That one today? Looked like a goose trying to do ballet. Joke number 2, pirouetting with poultry imagery. Meanwhile, inside the palace walls, the mood is less playful. The king's inner circle meets again. Papers pile up. Trial records. Shoe sketches. Lists of fines collected. You lean in as the treasurer notes that the crown has brought in more coin from Palain penalties than from wool tariffs this season. The king frowns. It's not meant to be profitable, he mutters. It's meant to restore discipline. But it is profitable, his scribe whispers, eyes shining like a man who's just found a way to fund his book collection. The king waves him off. He's not here to get rich. He's here to make a point. But if the point is so important, why are more people than ever finding ways around it? You slip into the back of the records room, where all confiscated items are logged. The scrolls are massive. Pages and pages of shoe lengths, toe descriptions, materials used. One guard has taken to sketching particularly egregious offenders. His latest features a boot with tips shaped like unicorn horns. It's labeled Visual Menace. You chuckle. He shrugs. It's the only joy I get in this job. That's joke number 3, drawn in charcoal and sarcasm. But not everyone's playing. You overhear 2 nobles whispering in the garden later that day, tucked behind a hedge like schoolboys hiding a broken goblet. If they inspect again, we're done, one hisses. The slippers from the lawn still haven't arrived. Just for the backup pair. They squeak, then say they're enchanted. They glance around and go quiet when a servant passes, because now, anyone might report you. Envy runs deep, and a neighbor with a grudge might mention your off-duty Polains in exchange for royal favor. There's even talk of a lady-in-waiting being dismissed after a jealous cousin accused her of toe deception. Yes, that's a real phrase now. The ripple effect reaches further. One church choir refuses to sing until the bishop stops wearing blunt-toed boots they claim muffle the spirit. A puppeteer is arrested mid-performance after a child points out the villain puppet is wearing curly-toed shoes. The guards confiscate it. The children boo. You watch it all and realize something strange. The law is creating more drama than the shoes ever did. Back in the city square, the trial pike still stands. Now adorned with ribbon. Someone's written a poem about it. Another's hung a fake crown from the tips. You stare up at the shoes and wonder, not for the first time, if the king knows that every punishment adds to the legend. And if maybe, just maybe, those curled toes are pointing the way forward. Night falls like a heavy curtain, the kind that muffles sounds and secrets alike. But not even the dark can hide what's happening now, because in the alleys behind bakeries and under the arches of stables, a different kind of patrol prowls the streets. They're called the Treaders. Officially, they're palace-appointed foot inspectors. Unofficially, they're glorified shoe spies, paid to sniff out illicit footwear, knock on doors, peek under cloaks, and, if necessary, strip nobles and peasants alike of their decorative dignity, one toe at a time. You first spot them near the market, 3 figures in matching dark cloaks, their boots so polished they reflect torchlight like gossip in a mirror. They walk slowly, intentionally, scanning the ground like hunters. And they don't knock. They tap. Once. Twice. Just loud enough to chill the air. A butcher's boy sees them coming and kicks off his boots mid-sprint. You hear one land in a puddle, the other bounce off a goose. He runs barefoot through the square. One shredder picks up the soggy boot and mutters, 5 inches. Illegal. Evidence. Joke number 1. Goose not included. You follow them, careful not to clomp. These aren't the clumsy guards of market patrols. They're silent, systematic, surgically focused. One carries a scroll of known offenders. Another has a measuring rod disguised as a walking stick. The third? She just watches. No clipboard, no quill, just the kind of eyes that make you wish your socks were blander. They stop at a blacksmith's house. Knock, tap tap. The door opens a crack. A sleepy voice says, "What's wrong?" They respond with the dreaded words, "Show us your soles." It's not just the rich getting inspected anymore. The law has trickled down. Commoners are terrified, not just of fines, but of being accused of pretending nobility. That's the real crime now. Not just vanity, but ambition. You hear a woman plead, "I only wore them for my wedding," as 2 treaders pull her pointed slippers from a chest wrapped in linen and hope. "They were my mother's." Still confiscated. And, new regulation, shoes seized from the lower classes must now be destroyed upon collection. Historians still argue whether the destruction clause was meant to prevent resale or to crush morale. Either way, it worked. For some. But others? They adapt. You slip into a tailor's parlor posing as a candle merchant. The tailor, a squirrely man named Beckett, doesn't sell shoes, but he does modify them. Come in short, leave long, he whispers, waggling his eyebrows. He's pioneered the toe joint, a hidden hinge inside the shoe that extends when pressure is applied just so. Invisible. Illegal. Ingenious. His customers call it the stretch. His enemies call it blasphemy. The treaders have heard of it. Beckett shows you one of their warning scrolls, posted secretly on the back of his door. Be wary of the following illicit methods. Toe stuffing, hiding extra length inside hollow shoes. Layered lacing, appearing legal but secretly adding slide-on extensions. False feet, need we explain? Each method gets its own little drawing. You're 80% sure one sketch looks like your own boots. Joke number 2, framed in state-sponsored doodles. But Beckett isn't scared. Not yet. He knows how to lie under pressure. He practices in the mirror. These are ceremonial only. I am but a humble craftsman. That's not a toe, it's a protective snout. You thank him and slip back into the cold. Elsewhere, the treaders aren't just working street level anymore. They've infiltrated the palace. You spot one during a banquet, posing as a wine pourer. She moves quietly, eyes down, but every few steps, she glances at the feet of courtiers. One lord catches her staring and chuckles nervously. Admiring the embroidery, he asks. She smiles thinly, counting the stitches. Joke number 3, soaked in red wine and dread. In the queen's chamber, even her ladies are under watch. You hear one whisper, I thought being royal meant exemption. Another hisses back, only if the king likes your shoes. The paranoia spreads. Wardrobe servants are now trained in compliance folding. Shoe closets are rearranged weekly. Anyone requesting repairs on pre-band styles is flagged. One night, you find yourself in the back corridors of the palace, watching 2 treaders confront a young squire. He's barely 17, nervous as a ferret in church, and his shoes are borderline. The tips curl ever so slightly. Not illegal, but suggestive. They measure 4.5 inches. Legal. They don't arrest him, but they give him the look. That we're watching you look. He gulps and promises to file them down. File them down. It's absurd. And yet, real. You slip back into your hiding place, exhausted. You've seen the system now. The machinery. The fear. The secrecy. But more than that, you've seen the resistance. Quiet, clever, softly defiant. One slipper at a time. And in that resistance, something's growing. Not just rebellion. Not just style. But solidarity. Because when people start hiding their shoes in the same holes, slipping messages under the same insoles, and smuggling their expression in leather packages tied with blue thread, something bigger is stepping forward. And you? You're part of it now. You're trudging along a frozen village road, slipping on the occasional rock, when it hits you, quite literally, that maybe medieval fashion wasn't designed with human anatomy in mind. Your left foot catches on a curled toe from someone else's boot. You stumble, arms flailing, and land in a shallow ditch. A shepherd passing by raises an eyebrow. That's why I wear sandals, he says. It's snowing. Joke number 1, frostbite couture. But it's not just you. Across the kingdom, people are falling. Tripping. Twisting ankles. Dislocating dignity. And it's all thanks to a shoe trend that just won't die, even as it shreds ligaments and tempers alike. Welcome to the backlash. Inside a tiny apothecary that smells of dried thyme and goat regret, you watch a healer wrap the swollen ankle of a young maid. Caught her toe on a stair, he mutters. Third one this week. On the shelf beside him are rows of balms, liniments, and one jar ominously labeled toe soother. You pick it up. It smells like boiled pine cones and shame. This is the part of the story most people forget, the physical toll. The medieval world isn't smooth floors and manicured lawns. It's cobbles, mud, stairs, and horses. Wearing a shoe that's longer than your arm? It's a daily gamble with gravity. Historians still argue whether long-term injuries from lanes were ever medically documented or just whispered about behind closed curtains. But you find the records, quiet notes in royal ledgers marked court physician's log. One entry reads, Lord B, unable to kneel, excessive toe length cited. Another, Duchess fainted upon entangling hem with left pallane, mild concussion. In the palace infirmary, you meet a nurse who says she's developed a whole system for diagnosing fashion trauma. Blisters. Sprains. even spinal strain. She shows you a diagram of the human foot with various toe overhang zones, all colored in with alarming reds and yellows. Most of them won't admit the real cause, she says, tightening a bandage. They claim a dog startled them or the wind shifted. She rolls her eyes. One baron blamed the moon. Joke number 2, and lunar liability law. But there's one injury you keep hearing about again and again, bunions. The kind that swell and twist and make it impossible to walk without wincing. You trail an aging knight to his quarters. He peels off his boots with a groan and reveals toes that look like they've tried to mutiny. 40 years of this, he says, propping his feet up. Used to be proud of them. Now I trade him for a good pair of wool socks and a horse that doesn't laugh when I limp. You suggest maybe the fashion's not worth it. He glares. It's never about the fashion. It's about standing out. Even if you fall down afterward. That's the twisted truth. These shoes hurt, but giving them up hurts more. Back in town, a group of laborers has started mocking nobles by wearing exaggerated Pauline-shaped casts made of plaster. They hobble around, moaning dramatically, then take a bow and pass a hat for tips. One says, for a copper, I'll spray my ego too. Joke number 3, cast in stone and sarcasm. But humor isn't always enough to stop the pain. You meet a woman named Marla who used to sew shoes for a baroness. She insisted on 14 inches, Marla says. Said it helped her walk taller. Marla's hands shake now. Years of sewing impossible curves, stretching leather until her knuckles cracked. She walks tall, all right, she mutters. But her heels bleed every night. Marla doesn't make shoes anymore. She makes cushions for invalids. There's a market, she says. Pain pays. Even the clergy is speaking up. In a sermon you catch near the city gates, a friar preaches about the suffering of the soul. He doesn't mean soul. He means feet. The Lord did not command man to walk as a peacock struts, he bellows. He gave us toes to grip the earth, not jab it from 12 inches away. He's met with applause. And a chicken. It's unclear who threw the chicken. Possibly divine intervention. The king, of course, hears about the injuries. A report lands on his table listing 10 noblemen who slipped downstairs, 3 ladies who fainted in mud, and 1 ambassador who got stuck in a chapel pew. He frowns. But does he lift the ban? No. He doubles down. He issues a new clause. All remaining pole lanes must be inspected for dangerous curvature. Guards are trained to look not just for length, but for angle. If it points too sharply upward, it's now considered a trip risk to public decorum. Decorum. The final injury. You watch the tailors groan. Now we have to flatten the tips, one cries. What's next? Sandpaper slippers? Meanwhile, a noblewoman commissions shoes so straight they look like hooves. She claims they're reformed. Everyone else calls her the Countess of Clomp. It doesn't stop. The pain, the mockery, the quiet rebellion with every curled toe kept hidden beneath a cloak. People limp with pride. They wince with dignity. Because deep down, even as their joints swell and their arches scream, they still believe in the beauty of the curve. And isn't that the absurd heart of it? To suffer, intentionally, fashionably, fabulously, for something so silly, so glorious, so pointlessly pointy. You cross the channel on a ship that creaks like a reluctant confession. The salt air tastes sharper here, and the deck smells of wet rope, seaweed, and pipe smoke, plus a dash of nervous energy from the noble beside you who keeps adjusting his head every time someone mentions fashion. You're bound for France. Not because things have cooled off in England, oh no. If anything, the tension there is thick enough to bottle and sell as a new form of medieval glue. But word on the wind says that across the water, the French court has taken a different approach. They've gone longer. You dock in Calais, boots damp and eyes wide, and within moments, you spot them, toes like daggers. Polanes so long they curl into loops, swirls, and the occasional question mark. A man passes wearing a pair that clinks softly with every step. You glance down, yes, they've been tipped with miniature bells. He walks like he's narrating his own arrival. The French, it seems, never met a fashion restriction they couldn't mock into oblivion. At the court of Charles VI, yes, that Charles, the one with occasional lapses in sanity and an all-consuming interest in astrology, the shoe game is out of control. You wander the halls and hear whispers of contests. Not justs. Not duels. Toe-length showdowns. One knight brags his pole lanes are 2 feet long. Another corrects him, 27 inches. measured flat. The difference matters. You spot a lady whose shoes are so long they require decorative support poles, tiny rods of ivory capped with gold. They drag beside her like inverted ski poles, and she makes a faint jingling sound with every step. You can't decide if she's intimidating or absurd. Probably both. Joke number 1, the Nordic toe pole aesthetic. Historians still debate whether the French extended the polaine out of sincere admiration or as an elaborate joke on the English. One theory claims it was a pointed political insult, pun fully intended. Your king banned them, says one French courtier. We wear them longer now. Out of solidarity and spite. You catch a glimpse of a noble dancing in the Grand Salon. His toes swing in graceful arcs, slicing through candlelight like sickles. He spins, and the crowd applauds, not for his rhythm, but for the way his polaines perfectly trace the outline of a fleur-de-lis on the marble floor. Yes, it's choreographed. The French don't just wear polaines, they perform them. And they're not hiding. Unlike the underground English slipper syndicates, here the shoes are status, defiance, and theater rolled into one. A noblewoman tells you that every inch of curve equals one verse of a poem she composed herself. Another says her shoes double as scroll holders, she stores secret messages in the lining. Sometimes, she purrs, they're love notes. Sometimes, recipes. Joke number 2, espionage and soufflé. You ask one court tailor how they haven't faced backlash. Oh, but we have, he exclaims. 3 bishops called us sinful. 1 prince banned toe jewels. It lasted 4 days. Then he ordered a pair with sapphires. He gestures to a mannequin wearing polaines that end in soft flames, actual cloth-shaped and dyed like fire, looking up toward the shins. He said it represents passion through discomfort. That might be the national motto at this point. You slip into a side salon, where a group of musicians plays lute ballads while guests try not to trip over each other. One man stands out, shoes so long they're carried on a litter, not even worn. They're displayed like art. The room circles around him like courtiers orbiting a fashion sun. You ask someone if this is normal. In England, you punish excess, they say with a smirk. In France, we crown it. Joke number 3, delicately dipped in pride in Bordeaux. But beneath all this flair, you sense something deeper. A response. A provocation. France is watching England's crackdown, reading every decree, every confiscation, and choosing to respond not with diplomacy, but with design. For every pair of shoes burned in London, Paris stitches a longer toe. The rebellion is artistic now. Transnational. You find a scroll in the quarters of a visiting diplomat. It's a satirical poem titled The King Who Feared a Slipper. It opens. His Majesty declared it so, that toes shall neither curl nor grow. For feet too long might carry sin. Or worse, they draw the eye within. It ends with a flourish. So we, the free of velvet court, shall let our feet and dreams cavort. No author listed. But a French courtier tells you it was read aloud at a dinner party last week. Guests laughed until someone's shoe caught fire on a table candle. You believe it. Back on the street, you see a group of street performers, clowns, maybe, dressed in caricatures of English lawmen. They parade up and down in boots tied to each other by the toes, tripping intentionally and collapsing in dramatic heaps. The crowd roars. The satire is sharp. The saws are sharper. And you wonder, does the English king know? Has he heard? Has someone told him that every rule he pens becomes a French lyric? That his solemn proclamations echo here in snickers and glittering stitches? He probably has. But he won't admit it. You linger on a bridge at dusk, watching the city's lamps twinkle to life. Below, a nobleman's shadow dances, his toes extending past the railing like punctuation on the skyline. You smile. In England, they fear the foot. In France, they lead with it. You return to England under a sky so gray it seems custom-made by a monarch who's sick of joy. The ship rocks against the dock, and as your boots hit solid ground again, you feel the change immediately, not just in temperature, but in tension. The French? They're twirling their polaines like ribbons. The English? They're watching each other's feet like spies at a dance. It's Sunday, and that means sermons. You're just slipping into the back pew of a stone chapel, cold, drafty, modestly threatening, when the priest begins his weekly war on footwear. Father Aldrich again, his voice echoing through the rafters like thunder from someone who's never once worn soft shoes. And what is the toe? I ask you, he cries. Is it not a modest member? Should it stretch forth with pride, like the neck of a peacock? No! The Lord gave you 10 for balance, not for boasting. A woman near you hides her feet under her cloak. A man nudges his wife and mutters, he's got the sermon lengthened again, must be jealous. Joke number 1, whispered in woolen bitterness. The church has doubled down. Across the realm, bishops are instructed to include modesty of foot in their weekly addresses. One cathedral even installs a small wooden gauge by the entrance. If your shoe can't fit through the frame, you don't get in. They call it the portal of humility. The choir boy snickers every time someone gets turned away. And it's not just about pride anymore. Now it's sin. Vanity, lust, idleness, each one tied to the way your shoes curl. You strut like Lucifer, one monk preaches, and trip like a fool. Thus, you shall fall in both body and soul. Historians still argue whether the church's vendetta against pointed shoes came from sincere piety or was a calculated move to align with royal authority. Either way, they lean in hard. You attend another sermon in a village near York where the priest pulls out an actual pair of confiscated polaines and lays them across the altar like contraband relics. This, he declares, is temptation stitched in goat hide. He lifts them up like they might bite him. A baby cries. Someone sneezes. The room holds its breath. Then he sets them on fire. In the chapel. On the altar. Even the choir gasps. The smell of burning leather and sinful souls fills the space. One old man mutters, that's the 4th pair this week. Poor altar cloth's going to smell like a boot shop till Easter. Joke number 2, seasoned in ash and incense. The church has started its own confiscation effort now. Monks patrol certain markets in pairs, quietly suggesting that traders donate their more aggressive wares to the cleansing flame. Some comply. Others claim ignorance. One baker offers his left shoe out of spite. I baked in these. If they're sinful, so is your breakfast. Not everyone finds it funny. In private homes, people begin hiding their shoes during visits from priests. Mothers tell their children to wear sandals to communion. Wealthier families begin commissioning Sunday shoes, bland, shapeless things worn only for Mass, then immediately swapped out for more stylish fare. A cottage industry of conversion shoes emerges. Essentially, attachable tops for your polaines to make them look humble. Cloth caps. Felt covers. One cobbler calls his invention foot bonnets. Another, less subtle, names his toe disguisers for the righteous. Church leaders catch on quickly. A new decree follows. No add-ons. No slipcovers. If your shoes need hiding, your soul probably does too. You sigh. Even the righteous need flair. Back in London, the bishops begin coordinating directly with the royal court. You peek into a chamber where scrolls are exchanged like battle plans. One priest reports a merchant selling band styles behind his spice counter. Another notes that a tavern near the docks hosts polaine pageants on Fridays. Winners receive ale and a stitched sash reading Lord of the Laces. That's joke number 3, complete with honorary title. You wander past a chapel at dusk and spot a boy kneeling in front of a stained glass window. His shoes, tiny but pointy, poke out beneath his robe. A priest notices and sighs, then pulls out a knife. Not for violence. For trimming. The boy holds still while the priest slices off the tips and mutters a prayer. The shoe shavings fall like dark snow. He hands the knife back solemnly and says, "Thank you, Father. I feel holier already." He doesn't. You hear whispers of a secret pilgrimage route through the north, one where devotees walk barefoot to avoid temptation. Some do it for penance. Some do it to keep their nice shoes safe in a satchel. But others? Others go in defiance. A woman named Ada starts leading hearth sermons in her cottage. Quiet gatherings where people sit by the fire, read scripture, and compare polaines. She preaches humility, yes, but also beauty. We honor God with craft, she says. With joy. He made our feet. He didn't say they couldn't be fashionable. You see a teenage boy show up in boots embroidered with lilies. He weeps when no one mocks him. You smile. Because amid all the ash and brimstone, some are finding grace. Maybe not in cathedrals, but in cozy firesides, stitched in silk and tucked in side seams. It starts with a rumor. A whispered name, passed between apprentices and errand boys, fluttering through the air like lint from an old velvet cloak, Solum Scriptura. The name sounds half Latin, half mischief, and entirely secret. You chase it through back alleys and butcher stalls, through tailors' lofts and scribes' dens, until finally, in a bookbinder's attic that smells like dust and boiled glue, you find it, a shoe. A single, solitary shoe. At first, it looks ordinary, well-made, dyed plum, tasteful embroidery around the ankle. But then you peer closer. Not at the leather, but the stitching. And there it is, a message, woven into the seams in impossibly fine thread. No law binds the soul that dreams. And suddenly, you understand. People aren't just wearing outlawed shoes anymore. They're writing with them. It begins subtly. One noble commissions slippers with tiny silver stars stitched on the inside lining. Another wears boots with a sun and moon motif curling around the toe, visible only when he bows. A commoner sneaks a single Latin word into the trim of his boot, ignis, fire. Historians still argue whether these coded messages were ever coordinated or simply 1,000 small rebellions born from the same spark. But soon enough, they begin to echo, to rhyme, to repeat. You find a court seamstress in a drafty corridor whispering over a pair of traveling boots. "This one's for a baron headed to Kent," she says, threading her needle with dark green silk. He wants it to say honor bends. But the toe points forward. That's joke number 1, poetic, absurd, and utterly brave. Even the clergy catches on. You sneak into a bishop's quarters and notice his modesty shoes have a row of tiny cross stitches under the heel, nothing fancy, just the word mercy, repeated again and again. When you ask the servant who stitched them, she just shrugs. "Sometimes," she says, "a little rebellion saves a lot of prayers." In a village inn, you meet a woman named Tilda. She makes travel boots for merchants. "Every pair gets a blessing," she says with a wink. You look closely, the inside of each tongue bears a single phrase, backwards, in mirror script. One reads "Walk your truth." Another, "The king cannot measure dreams." They're not just shoes anymore. They're scrolls. You return to Elswith's underground cellar, the slipper syndicate, still thriving, and she shows you a growing archive. One entire wall now displays outlawed pairs, each one carefully preserved and labeled not by size, but by message. One boot bears a stitched dove with the words "Peace beneath pressure." Another features ivy winding around a dagger. What grows, resists. But it's the newest pair that freezes you. They're plain, almost drab, except for the tiniest embroideries stitched along the edge of the sole. For those who kneel only to rise. She tells you they were commissioned by a jester. He wears them under bells. Says no one suspects a fool. Joke number 2, truth disguised in jest. Even messengers get involved. You intercept a courier outside the city, boots dusty and well-worn. He's heard the stories. He shows you his shoes, completely unadorned on the outside, but the insoles are lined with verses. Verses he wrote himself. "I'm a poet," he says, "but my scrolls get inspected. My shoes don't." A wandering monk admits to embroidering his shoes with psalms, not for show, but so he can walk on sacred words, feel them beneath his feet. You raise an eyebrow. "They said I couldn't preach with my tongue," he replies. "So now I preach with my toes." Joke number 3. Praise be to the pointed sermon. Even children join in. One group of orphan girls begins stitching friendship phrases into each other's slippers. Not rebellious, just tender, "I'm beside you." No cold alone. Your steps matter. It spreads. Quietly. Beautifully. And the king? Well, he starts to notice. A new decree arrives, stern, clunky, full of words like unauthorized text, inscribed blasphemy, and treasonous footwear. It bans any written or symbolic embellishment not approved by the crown. Officially, all shoes are now subject to scriptorial review. Yes, you heard that right. Your shoes now need literary inspection. The royal scribes are not thrilled. One gets so frustrated he stabs his quill through the sole of a duchess's boot. Another develops a twitch every time someone says toe poetry. They try to catalog the messages, confiscate the coded pairs, burn the ones they can't decipher. But they can't stop the tide, because it's no longer about being fancy, or rebellious, or even defiant. It's about expression. These shoes carry the weight of silenced thoughts, of prayers no longer whispered, of laughter, grief, love, and fury, all stitched into the very thing that touches the earth with every step. You look down at your own boots. Nothing fancy. A little worn. But there, inside the hem, barely visible to anyone but you, 4 words. Still standing. Still speaking. And for the first time in a long while, you feel lighter. Not because the road ahead is easier, but because the path beneath you finally listens. You step into a mirrored hall so bright it could blind a crow. Every surface gleams, silver chandeliers, polished marble, gold-framed portraits of men who all look like they've just won a shoe contest. Welcome to Versailles. Yes, we've jumped forward a bit, because while England has been busy measuring toes and torching embroidery, France has continued, evolving. And you? You've come to see what happens when shoe law takes a different turn. A sharp, dazzling turn. At the center of the gleam stands King Louis XIV, the Sun King. Hair as big as a lion's, face powdered like a pastry, and heels that could stab a man. Bright red. Glossy. 2 inches high. The statement of the century, or at least of this one. You stare. Everyone does. Because here, now, the obsession is no longer with toe length, it's with height. Elevation. The soul may still yearn, but the soul? It must rise. Historians still argue whether Louis wore red heels to assert dominance or simply because he liked the sound they made on marble. But one thing is clear, when he declared that only nobility could wear red-soled heels, fashion became law all over again, just, vertically. You remember England's Pallane panic and wonder, is this a repeat, or a reinvention? One courtier struts by with heels so tall he has to lean on a cane carved from ivory and resentment. Another teeters dramatically beside a fireplace, and you swear he's calculating the angle of his bow to avoid toppling like a well-dressed bookshelf. Joke number 1, fashion's gone from pointy to perilous. You meet a shoemaker named Emile, quarter-pointed and perpetually exhausted. It used to be embroidery, he sighs, showing you a sketch of a boot with swan-shaped heels. Now it's physics. He points to a diagram scrawled on parchment, some kind of formula for balance, involving heel height, arch curve, and political favor. If the heel's too short, you're ignored. Too tall, you're ridiculed. Just right, and suddenly you're invited to the opera and offered a province. He hands you a sample. It's feather-light, red-lacquered, and somehow both elegant and ominous. Do you walk in them? You ask. He shrugs. You try. Then you glide. Then you fall. Then you command someone to carry you. Joke number 2, delicately perched. At court, red heels are everywhere. They click like war drums in a chamber made of glass. You watch a nobleman trip on a rug and nearly knock over a duchess. Instead of laughing, she gasps and says, "Are you all right? Your shoes, are they intact?" You catch on fast. These aren't accessories. They're extensions of power. One lady whispers that her heels have tiny hollow compartments filled with perfume, in case I'm faint from flattery. Another boasts hers contain rolled-up copies of royal decrees, for emergencies and gossip accuracy. And remember the English stitching rebellion? France adds sparkle. Here, embroidery is still alive and thriving, on heels, across arches, and inside ankle straps. Messages, names, horoscopes. A marquis shows you his boots and points to an inscription, "I rise, therefore I rule." His friend says, "All men beneath me." You notice some nobles wear heels even to bed, or claim they do. One man commissions a pair of night slippers with little padded risers, just to keep the image alive. "I may sleep," he declares, "but I do not lower." Joke number 3, snoring in luxury. But not all admire the trend. Whispers start. A general claims the heels are a threat to military posture. A nun writes a scathing letter about vanity's ascent. A merchant's daughter falls down 3 stairs and sues the shoemaker, saying, "Your artistry bruised my dignity." And yet the height rises. It's not just men. Women adopt the look too. Some push it further, heels on boots, on mules, even on wooden clogs. The kitchen staff start wearing lifted shoes with false red soles, just to feel part of the drama. It becomes so widespread, the king issues a second decree. Henceforth, red heels are reserved for those in the king's favor. All others are to wear brown or suffer humiliation. So, a hierarchy, by hue. You flash back to England, where toe length defined class. Now it's color. Same story, different palette. But Louis isn't hiding it. He walks into rooms and clicks. That sharp, rhythmic tick that says, "Here comes your god." His heels aren't just shoes, they're punctuation. And then, in a grand feast, you see it all come full circle. A visiting English noble arrives. His shoes? Rounded toes, matte leather, flat soles. Tasteful. Lawful. The French nobles stare like he's walked in barefoot. Later, you hear a woman giggle behind her fan. Did he walk here? Another chimes in. He must be so grounded. They howl. The Englishman, bless him, tries to explain the Polaine ban, how King Edward cracked down, how rebellion sparked in thread and secret sauce. But they just nod, bemused. That sounds exhausting, someone sighs, sipping wine. Why not just rise above it? You realize then, France didn't reject England's obsession. They refined it. Where England feared fashion, France turned it into a crown. Where England punished expression, France polished it, raised it, lacquered it red. And as the music starts, as nobles twirl and clack across the marble like fashion-forward centaurs, you wonder, what's worse? Being banned from beauty? Or being required to perform it? You return to England just in time to see a duke fall flat on his face. Not metaphorically. Literally. He goes down like a sack of onions, robes billowing, wig flying sideways. The cause? His Polaines. They're not even contraband. Just excessive. The tip of his left shoe caught on a tapestry cord during a royal procession, and down he went, in front of the king, the court, and a group of visiting Flemish dignitaries who politely pretended to sneeze into their sleeves while suppressing laughter. You stand at the edge of the gathering, watching as two pages scramble to help him up, his face redder than a boiled beet. A jester nearby quips, "His Grace has been tripped by His Grace." That gets a chuckle. Joke number 1, accidental poetry by footwear. But King Edward IV is not laughing. You see it in the tight set of his jaw. The twitch in his left cheek. That thing he does with his thumb when he's plotting something drastic. Because this is the final straw. The noble didn't just trip, he ruined the entrance to a key diplomatic meeting, embarrassed the crown, and nearly crushed the king's prized hunting dog in the fall. That dog? That's not a pet. That's a political mascot. So it begins. The king storms back to his chambers and issues what becomes known as the Final Foot Edict. This one is different. Harsher. No more measurements. No more fines. No more class exceptions. Just one rule. No pointed toes. Anywhere. Ever. Flat. Round. Functional. That's it. It's not a shoe law. It's a shoe purge. Historians still argue whether this moment marked the true end of the Polaine or simply the beginning of the underground's golden age. But everyone agrees, it was sudden, sweeping, and enforced with terrifying enthusiasm. You trail the new task force, no longer the foot watch, but the shoefall marshals. They were hard-soled boots and carry measuring rods sharpened into sticks. They go door to door, ripping apart wardrobes, searching under floorboards, even checking behind chimney stones. You witness the confiscation of a pair of velvet slippers hidden in a baby's bassinet. The mother cries. The guard shrugs. Better safe than stylish, he mutters. Joke number 2, cradle crimes of couture. Public burnings resume, this time bigger, louder, with drums. Whole wagons of shoes are carted into the town square. Blacksmiths build a pyre. A royal crier lists off the names of nobles whose shoes are being destroyed. The list includes knights, abbots, even a bishop who once tried to claim his were symbolic of ecclesiastical authority. They're not sparing anyone now. You notice something strange. People stop walking with pride. Heads bow, steps shorten. Even those in compliance seem smaller. As if round toes have somehow deflated their posture. Fashion was never just flair. It was armor. And now, stripped of it, they walk barefoot in spirit. At a small tavern, a former shoemaker named Bram tells you he's stopped making shoes entirely. It's not the soles that broke me, he says, staring into his beer. It's the silence. No more questions. No more orders. Just resignation. You ask what he means. People don't want to rebel anymore. They just want to not get noticed. That's the heartbreak of tyranny, when even beauty feels dangerous. But not everyone's gone quiet. You hear whispers of the last curve. A noble, unidentified, who plans to defy the king by debuting one final, glorious pair of Polaines at the upcoming spring equinox feast. A last stand. A leather-clad act of defiance. You're intrigued. So you dig. In private parlors and dusty libraries, you follow the trail. There's talk of a baroness with a secret attic workshop. A tailor who's been stitching in silence for weeks. A courier seen transporting unusual parcels wrapped in fur. The night of the feast arrives. The hall gleams with gold, but no one's smiling. The room pulses with tension. You can smell it, somewhere between rosemary and dread. And then, silence. A figure enters, clad in silver and deep crimson, with curls cascading over his shoulders and a cloak lined in ermine. But you don't look at his face. You look down. The Polanes are monstrous. Nearly 2 feet long, braided with silver thread. The tips curl back like twin question marks, one of which is studded with tiny rubies. Gasps. A fork clatters. The harpist misses a note. The king rises. Everyone watches. No one breathes. The noble bows, low, elegant, dangerous. And then, he trips. Not a big fall. Just a wobble. One curled toe catches under a chair leg, and he stumbles forward into a table of glazed pears. A loud thunk. A pear flies. It hits the royal dog again. The silence breaks like a wineglass under a boot. The king storms out without a word. The noble is escorted out shortly after, Polanes removed, head high. The guests? They don't laugh. They don't clap. They just watch. And then, as if nothing happened, the music resumes. Quietly. Dutifully. But you can feel it in the air. Something ended tonight. Not with a bang. Not with a fire. But with a wobble. Joke number 3, soft and sticky with fruit. You walk home that night through a city darker than before. Not in shadow, no, the torches still burn. But in spirit. A world that's been told it can't wear joy on its feet anymore. And yet, in one alley, you spot it, a child's drawing scratched into the dirt. A boot with a curling toe. Labeled simply, someday. The ban is still in place. But the shoes? Gone. No more burnings. No more trials. No more royal proclamations stapled to church doors. After that last spectacle, the noble, the stumble, the pear-splattered dog, the kingdom seems to collectively exhale. Not in relief. In fatigue. The Polane craze is over. And it didn't die in flames or by royal decree. It died by embarrassment. You drift through the capital streets in a daze of muted fashion. The shops have restocked with round-toed boots. Cloaks cover simple slippers. Even the cobblers have repainted their signs. No more curls. No more flair. Just bluntness in every sense of the word. You pass a cart loaded with firewood and, atop it, a pair of shoes. Short. Sensible. Uglier than honesty. The cart driver sees you staring and shrugs. We don't trip in these, he says. No one dares reply. It's strange, isn't it? To see something so defining just vanish. Not overnight. Not with celebration. Just fade into the cracks like crumbs from a feast you can barely remember. You find a tailor hunched over a bench, mending a tunic sleeve. His walls are bare. You ask about his shoemaking past, and he waves a hand. Fool's game. Customers want tight lines, nothing extravagant. He says the word like it's poisonous. You gently press. Do they ask why? They don't ask anything, he says. They just want a blend. That's the new fashion now. Invisibility. Historians still debate whether the disappearance of the Polane was due to legislation, changing tastes, or pure social exhaustion. Some say the style just ran its course. Others claim fear lingered long after the edicts stopped being enforced. But everyone agrees on one thing. The law outlived the look. For decades after the shoes disappeared, the rules stayed on the books. Scrolls full of maximum toe allowance and acceptable foot curvature still sat in courtrooms like relics of a forgotten war. Occasionally dusted, rarely enforced, but never repealed. You visit a village courthouse where one such scroll hangs framed on the wall. Below it, someone has scrawled in charcoal, "Are we measuring souls, or sauls?" Joke number 1, as dry as the parchment it's written on. The law becomes a curiosity. A punchline. A trivia question at banquets. Which monarch outlawed curled toes? Oh, Edward! The one who tripped his own guess. And yet, for some, the memory stings. You meet a woman named Catherine, once a cobbler's apprentice, now a florist. She wraps stems in linen with practiced hands. They took more than shoes, she tells you. They took expression. You ask if she still has any. She leads you into her back room. Opens a drawer. And there it is. One shoe. Soft red leather. Barely 8 inches long, but elegantly curved, the toes spiraling just enough to wink. She strokes it like a relic. My mother made these, she says. Said they made her feel seen. You ask why she kept just one. She sighs. The other one was taken. I figured if I hit the left, I'd remember not to forget. You leave her shop heavy-footed. Because what does it say about a kingdom that keeps the ban long after the rebellion is gone? It says the fear never truly left. Not of tripping. Not of scandal. But of difference. That's what this always was about. Not toes. Not thread. Not heel height. It was about control. About narrowing the path of acceptability so tightly that even a shoe could betray you. You walk through the marketplace where pole lanes once strutted like proud swans. Now it's all mud brown, practical, flat-footed anonymity. A boy races past, his shoes completely unremarkable. But you notice, just for a second, the stitching near the heel curls upward. Not enough to break a rule. Just enough to remember. You turn a corner and find an old church notice board with a faded list of sins. Vanity. Lust. Excessive footwear. Someone scribbled underneath. Excessive hope is also forbidden. Please remain reasonable. Joke number 2, nailed to the wall by sarcasm. Even the royal court has adjusted. The king no longer speaks of shoes. His decrees are about roads, trade, war. The footstaff of justice sits in a storeroom, next to old banners and broken spears. You see at once, its silver edge dulled with dust. No one dares throw it away. It's too ridiculous. Or too sacred. Maybe both. And still, the ban remains. One judge, old, slow, and fond of boiled sweets, still lectures young scribes about acceptable foot silhouettes. But even he chuckles as he says it. What time, he sighs. The shoes were smarter than the politics. Joke number 3. Muted. True. You return to the wardrobe where all of this began. It's quiet now. Clean. Nothing hidden behind the curtains but dust and the faint scent of cedar. But you imagine them anyway. The red. The gold. The curls. The ridiculous pride of it all. And then, your own feet. Still flat. Still round. Still carrying you forward. But somewhere, tucked beneath your hem, perhaps just in spirit, you know there's a little curve. Not for rebellion. Not for fashion. Just for remembering. You return to the throne room, the heart of it all, where kings sit, laws are made, and toes once dared to reach for power. The air is heavy with history, whispers, and a faint trace of old leather. It's quiet now, but not empty. The echoes of 1,000 footsteps linger in the stone. Here, you realize, is the deeper truth behind the Palain pandemonium. The shoes were never just shoes. They were symbols, arrogance and aspiration stitched into every seam, proof that even your feet could challenge the order. You watch the empty throne, imagining King Edward IV's restless nights as he battled not just with shoelaces but with control itself. It wasn't vanity he feared. It was chaos, the unpredictable curve of human desire that refuses to be measured or muted. Historians still argue whether the shoe bans were about fashion, class, or something more profound, a struggle between authority and identity, between conformity and rebellion. The shoes were the battleground, but the war was over freedom. Outside the palace, the world has changed. Roads are wider, markets bustling, yet somewhere beneath the surface, the legacy remains, a whisper in every step, a question in every curve. Why do we fear what adorns our feet? Why does control reach so far, even to the tips of our toes? You stroll through a quiet garden, petals brushing your legs, the soft hum of bees like a lullaby. A child runs past, her shoes just a little too long, a mischievous curl at the tip. You smile. Because you know. The king tried to outlaw shoes. But he couldn't outlaw what they meant. Not the dreams. Not the defiance. Not the hope stitched beneath the leather. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important step of all.